think the bank knew exactly what we were doing. They encouraged it. They earned millions and millions of pounds out of it. They should have been in the dock with me.
Let me just ask you first of all, just by way of background, and you were fined £38,000 for illegally obtaining private information from bank clients. Let me ask you first, do you accept the justice of that? That was a reasonable penalty for what you did?
Well, no, I don't agree. What I was doing was acting on behalf of the bank for nearly 50 years. I'm not quite sure how to put this. We never, ever, ever had a complaint from any member of the public during the whole period that I worked for the bank. There was never a complaint from the public.
Well, just to be clear on that, Michael, and you did snoop into people's private background and details using false identities to extract information from various people. And many people, maybe most people, but just allow me, most people would consider that to be underhand. That's an appalling intrusion. They think that was a despicable way to behave. Do you not accept the force of that argument?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. It was a very small percentage of the bank's clientele that we were asked to look into. It was under 2% of the biggest bank in the country. You're talking about NatWest and the Royal Bank of Scotland. As I say, there was never a complaint from any member of the public, ever.
Presumably, though, Michael, if those who you were snooping on and getting private information on were aware you were doing that, they'd be complaining pretty quickly, wouldn't they?
Well, I'm not sure that they would. These people were trying to avoid paying the bank back. They were what we possibly term as their bad customers. They're non-paying debtors. They were the only ones we were looking at.
People with loans who weren't paying them back, and
they just weren't paying them back.
And
they were giving the bank various excuses as to why they weren't paying it back. It could declaring that if the bank put pressure on them, they'd make themselves bankrupt, or that they were suffering with ill health and therefore couldn't raise the money. Various reasons were given for not paying the bank back. The bank didn't believe them for whatever reason. They had their reasons. So they would employ an outside agent to make inquiries. They did have internal staff in their recoveries department, which could have made inquiries and possibly did up to a point. But when they didn't get to where they wanted them to get to, they would pass it out to an outside agent.
So you were trying to find out, for example, what assets these bank clients had, and so the bank...
Well, if they had any assets.
If they had assets.
Or if they were telling the truth.
To see if they were in a position to pay debts.
Yes, the bank had doubts as to whether they were being told the truth. Most of their clients, they believed, and they were being told the truth, but this area were where they were unhappy with what they'd been told, and they needed the assistance of an outside agent to make further inquiries.
So, Michael, I'm sure you must have been aware while you were doing this that you were breaching every rule and every right to privacy that existed.
Let me just explain. Firstly, there was only a small percentage of the people that we investigated that we used unethical or blagging methods. Most of what we did was done cleanly and above board, but there were certain instances when we wouldn't get cooperation from people and we had to use other methods in order to achieve the end product.
And you must have known that those cases, whatever proportion of cases they were outside the rules, were outside the right to privacy under the law.
Yes. Yeah.
So you did wrong, you knew you were doing wrong, you were right to be punished in the way that you were. Just establishing that, you accept that?
Well, one of the reasons I'm unhappy about it is because we only got a nominal basic fee for what we did. The information that we obtained enabled the bank to recover millions and millions of pounds. So, in my opinion, that is proceeds of crime. And that's why I think and I believe that the bank should have been in the dock with me, or that I should have been a witness and the bank should have been in the dock.
You say the bank were not only aware of what you were doing, they put you up to it. Can you show that that's the truth?
That's 100% the truth.
Well, I hear your argument, but can you prove that?
Well, the reports that we issued were very comprehensive. We never hid anything. The bank were fully aware. The more information we gave them, the more they wanted. Other agents on the panel of agents used by the bank were often instructed on the same case in order to cross-reference information. And I was the only one basically thrown under the bus, having been with them for nearly 50 years.
I mean, the Times had documents which show the NatWest Bank encouraged what has been called surveillance. Is that evidence that they were hand in glove with what you were doing?
They certainly were hand in glove, and they would ask for what they called discreet inquiries. That is information that I had from the bank, which I provided to the Times newspaper. They actually asked us to do exactly what we were doing.
In detail, knowing your methods.
They knew exactly.
How did they know? How did they know your methods?
It was all there in our reports. I didn't hide anything. It was there in our reports, and those reports were given on a weekly basis for nearly 50 years. Of course, they knew.
So when you took on an assumed identity and called a business or an agency, pretending to be the person you were investigating, that was in your report that you were doing that, and they knew what you were doing in that detail.
We didn't give it that detail. It was quite obvious from the information supplied and the way the reports were written that what we were doing. I mean, they could see what we were doing just by reading through the reports. And they were quite happy with those reports. And then they would ask for more information if we could get it.
And they told you, did they not, to have, I'm quoting, a plan if challenged about the investigations?
They did, yes. They did. That was amongst the papers that I was able to retrieve. In actual fact, the first time I read through those details, because I'd worked for them for so many years, I'd only seen that fairly recently, although it had been in my files for a long, long time.
Yes. I mean, you were using techniques like voice-changing software to track borrowers' financial information and health records, obviously against the Data Protection Act. You posed as customers. In your own mind, Michael, did it occur to you at any point that what you were doing was wrong?
Well, when you're providing a investigative service where debtors are telling lies about their situation, you have to adopt certain methods. If you can't find out in other ways, you have to adopt certain methods in order to be able to give these corporations the information that they need.
But not everyone you investigated was lying, were they, just to be clear?
No.
So those people were wrongly investigated, well, entirely wrongfully. They
were cleared. And the banks wouldn't, if they were cleared, the bank would stop putting pressure on them.
Yes. What's been the consequence of all of this for you since this case and since the fine? I mean,
Well,
what has been the consequence for you?
the consequence for me is that after 50 years, well, firstly, the bank led me to believe, by calling me into a meeting, that they were reorganising their global restructuring department and that I wouldn't receive work for about 2 weeks. This applied to all the agents they used. 2 weeks went by and I received an email apologising for the delay. That went on for probably another couple of months, and then I received another email with another apology, still instructing us to complete all the work that we had in hand. And that work was probably about 8 months' work. I was getting calls from Birmingham, which is where their recovery section was, from staff there that I knew very well, saying that the work wasn't going out to any other agents and it was piling up, and that when they get the okay, we would be inundated with work. That actually never happened. They said that I might hear from the directors before they hear as to whether work can start to be released.
Okay.
Well, I never actually heard.
Okay. So your livelihood has dried up, essentially.
Well, had they told me after 2 weeks or 4 weeks, I would have been able to at least try and replace the business. The business we were getting from the bank was the maximum we could cope with, and therefore I didn't try and find extra business. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to give them the service we were giving them.
Okay.
But that never happened. And halfway through the period, the bank sent me a new contract. All their contracts were for 3 years. I was 18 months into mine. They sent me a new 3-year contract. And I thought, well, that's a good sign. They obviously want to continue using me. I'm not worried. So I signed it and sent it back. When we virtually completed all the work, we got notification that they were terminating our contract. Unfortunately, it destroyed the business.
So your business went down the path. I mean, just lastly, the Information Commissioner says that they're comfortable with the bank's conduct and actions. What do you say to that?
Well, I don't think that's reasonable at all. I think that's completely wrong. I think the bank knew exactly what we were doing. They encouraged it. They earned millions and millions of pounds out of it. They should have been in the dock with me. And the other thing that I'd like to just mention is that since the article came out, I've had apparently 3 people from customers of the Global Restructuring Group have tried to make contact with me. So I've been informed by the newspaper, because they've got no issue with me. They've told them, but their issue is with the bank, and they want to know what our role was in terms of.
Yeah.
Am I right? Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.